This is Ask Joe number 180. One. Hello and welcome to the podcast. My name is Joe Gilder. This is the Home Studio Corner podcast, also known as Ask Joe, also known as hashtag Ask Joe Gilder. Whatever you want to call it, I'm glad you're here. If you're listening, thanks for listening and downloading. If you're watching on YouTube, hi. And if you're here on the live stream, which is the best way to do this because it's super fun, thanks for being here. Speaking of super fun, the whole reason that intro sounds as weird as it does is because of the people here. Tiki said you should try some sort of bit crusher, and so I used the bit crusher plugin in Studio One to ruin the vocal and guitar at the intro. Just absolutely ruin it. Also, there's a mosquito flying around my studio, and I haven't been able to kill him. So if I see him in the middle of this, I will stop and destroy him, because you can't be having that. Okay, today I want to talk about business. I've not talked a lot about that here on the podcast, or really in Home Studio Corner much at all. I've talked a little bit about it from a freelance standpoint and charging, having clients and charging for your services and things like that. But I really want to talk about it more because it's something that so many of you ask me questions about, or you have a question you haven't even asked it yet, or you're wanting to go down that path and you could use maybe a little insight, maybe a little encouragement, maybe a kick in the butt. I don't know. But I want to start talking, incorporate a little bit more of that into what I do here because it is a legit thing and it is something that is a very real possibility for a lot of people. And I want to talk about that a little more. So the question of the day is, are you good enough to start your own business? Now, I'm going to be talking about this in the context of being a musician and an audio engineer and having a studio, but certainly if you do other types of work, the question applies there as well. Are you good enough to start a business? So let me talk about, you may know what my answer to that question is going to be, but let me talk about it for a minute and give you kind of the Cliff Notes version of my backstory of how I started my business, which I've been running Home Studio Corner and doing audio stuff full time for years now. But it wasn't always that way. So when my first job out of college was working for Sweetwater Sound. If you know Sweetwater, sweetwater.com, great company based out of Fort Wayne, Indiana. I was a sales guy. So I was one of the sales engineers that would give you a call when you placed an order and say, hey, thanks for your order. And you'd call me and ask me, what's the best audio interface and blah, blah, blah. And then we'd have a conversation and I'd help you figure out what you need to buy. But very much a sales job. And it was there that actually got the first kind of hint that I might be an entrepreneur because I latched on to the idea of being able to work for results that would end up turning into a paycheck. So the idea of earning my paycheck and it being dependent on, really dependent on my performance and my results. For some people, that's crippling. For me, that was really exciting and it got me fired up. And I think it was kind of the beginnings of what led me to be an entrepreneur and to start my own business. So I did Sweetwater for a few years and really enjoyed it. Great company, but my wife wasn't happy and we had just gotten married and I moved her out of the South to Northeast Indiana, which is a different world. And she just wasn't loving it. So we always knew pretty early on that we would eventually come back to Nashville or back to the South at least. My family's down in Mississippi, so we wanted to be closer. So, we decided to move back, and I did several jobs moving back, but around toward the last 6 months of being at Sweetwater, I had this idea of starting a website. So here's how it kind of began. I would work, Sweetwater's open until 9 o'clock local time, that's Eastern time, because there are people who get home and have problems or want to order stuff at night, that type of thing, so we wanted to make sure we were available. And so every week I'd have to work usually one or two of the later shifts. So working from 11 to 8 or 12 to 9, which is fun because you get to sleep in and then come in. But, it's pretty slow at night, and I wasn't too keen on making a lot of calls, interrupting people at dinner, at nighttime, so I'd more just sit there and wait for people to call in who needed help. And one of the things I would do is I'd get bored, and I would just poke around online looking for, I ended up on the Waves website. So you're familiar with Waves plugins. And there wasn't a lot on their site, but they had kind of a resources page. And I remember there were like 2 mixing videos on there. And this is back in 2009. And I watched both of them, and they were great. One was about how to use a de-esser on heavy electric guitars to help tame the harshness, because they're not always harsh, but when they dig in, it can get a little harsh. So if you set the de-esser to kind of come in at that 3 to 5K range to knock down some of those harsh frequencies, it's a pretty cool thing. So I thought, that's a brilliant idea. I would have never thought of that, and I've done that since then. I've used that in electric guitars. I've used it on slaps on acoustic, like fingerstyle, where they slap the strings and it's too loud. De-esser works great for that. So it's one of those things of, man, I may have one day come up with that on my own, but I'm really glad I found this video because that was super insightful, and I'm going to steal that. Well, that was one of 2 videos on their site. They're this company, this fairly big company in the world of audio that only has 1 or 2 videos. Now, at the time, YouTube was only a couple years old. It wasn't this massive thing that it is now, and it made me crave these videos. I wanted to watch more. I wanted to find out what other people are doing, and I would look around and just couldn't find much. Now, it could be that I was just really bad at finding them, but more likely it was that there wasn't as much out there, and YouTube, there weren't many people on YouTube doing this type of thing. There were some. I'm not going to say I was the first one. That's ridiculous, but it wasn't as easy to find them. People doing audio tutorials on audio stuff just wasn't that common, or at least I couldn't find them. So I started thinking, I'm having these conversations with customers, and they'll buy a Pro Tools rig from me, and then they'll call me up and ask me how to set up reverb and things like that. And I realized that I'm happy to help them, but at some point, if I'm telling the same story over and over of how to set up a reverb, it would probably make more sense for me to make a video, put it on a website, and then I can send them there, and then I can go back to being on the phone and selling stuff to make money to, eat. And instead of spending all my time training my customers, because we're not set up to do training. We could do tech support, but not really training. And so that's kind of the first thing that led me to think about starting Home Studio Corner. I had a couple of personal blogs, so I liked writing. And I thought the idea of doing videos would be cool. I spent the last 3 years on a phone talking to people, so I'd kind of developed my radio voice. And so I thought it might be cool to do that as well. So I started the website and first did a series of articles called 12 Home Studio Necessities. My very first video was how to set up a reverb track, which is it's so bad. If you're bored, not now because I want you to stay here, but at the end of this, go look up my very first video. It'll take you a while to get there on my YouTube channel, but it's how to create a reverb track. And it's in my apartment in Fort Wayne, Indiana. And I'm so what's the word? Timid, I guess. It's kind of, hello, this is Joe Gilder, and I'm going to show you how to set up a reverb. And anyway, so that's kind of where it started. Ask Joe actually started in that first couple months. I did a video of me, and Ask Joe #1 was a video of me answering some questions on my phone that people had emailed me, and then it developed into a podcast, and then it actually developed into a series of articles where I answered questions, then eventually back to a podcast, and now it's a video. So anyway, we've had a long road, me and Ask Joe. But okay, so I started the website, and it's pretty soon after starting the website, I noticed there were a lot of people online who teach things about how you can actually make money from a website. And it didn't take me long to find those and to start obsessing over that and thinking, well, maybe you can make money from a website. But what really got me is a guy who was talking about treating it as a business. I'd never, ever thought about starting my own business, but starting a website was something I could do. And then suddenly I was in the same ballpark of starting a business, and I had kind of already sort of done it. So that led me to figuring out, ways to grow, doing an email list, creating products that I could sell to people, and all that kind of stuff. So all this to say, when I first started Home Studio Corner, when I was trying to pick the domain and buy the website, right, and build the website, I had to figure out a name. And my original name that I wanted to use was musictechsource.com, because I thought I was going to be talking about equipment and gear and doing product reviews and talking about music technology. And I wanted to appeal to everyone. I wanted to appeal to the pro engineer on the road. I wanted to appeal to the studio guy in Nashville and yeah, the home studio guy too. But as I kind of went down that path in my head, I thought, okay, I've never been a live sound engineer, really ever, a handful of times. And I've never worked in a big major studio. I've never worked on a major label release. The only big studio I worked at was in college when I worked in the big studios at the college. So I'm really not going to have much to offer the pro engineer in Nashville. And I kind of went down this line of like, okay, I can't really offer value to this person or this person because I've never done what they're doing. So there's really no way I can create anything that'll be valuable to them. Maybe product reviews, but I didn't want to just do product reviews. I wanted to do like tutorials and stuff. And eventually honed it down to, okay, what am I good at and what am I better than a lot of people at? And it came down to home recording. That was really the only thing I had done a ton of, that I had a ton of experience at and could talk with a level of confidence because I'd done so much of it. You know, if I started trying to talk about how to start your own $1 million recording studio, how to become the next Blackbird studio, like it'd be ridiculous because I'd never done that. And I would just be talking out my butt. So I had to find something I wasn't talking out my butt about. And that was home recording. Now, did that take this potential audience size from a huge number of people, everyone who subscribes to Sweetwater Catalog, down to just a smaller group? Yes, but it was a group that I could speak to and that I had experience, and generally more experience than they had. And so that's the road that I went down. And, you know, it seems like, oh, it's such a great decision in hindsight, but I was really just, I didn't want to embarrass myself talking about something I didn't know. Home recording is what I knew. It wasn't as fancy as some of the other stuff I wanted to do, but it was what I was going to do. And so that's kind of what led me into doing the Home Studio Corner thing. So fast forward a few years after doing it and creating stuff to sell and selling it and growing an audience and engaging with people, started making some money and eventually, you know, started getting a lot of client work from the website, which I never expected. People who learn about mixing from my site and then ask me to mix their record. Funny how that works. I never even predicted that. And then eventually, you know, to the point of where I had several jobs, really great jobs with people, and eventually was able to quit back in, what year was it? 2011? Yeah, 2012. 2011. No, it's 2011. July 1st, 2011 was the first month where I wasn't working for anybody and I was working on my own. So that was 5 years ago. That's insane. So I've been doing it for a while and supporting my family off of this business that I came up with and created. So what's the point of me telling you all that? Am I trying to brag on how awesome I am? No. I am a normal, way normal dude. I have some talent that I was given at birth, but I don't have any huge amounts of business insight. Everything I know about business I learned from either doing it wrong or occasionally doing it right, or reading a lot of books and being involved in a lot of different communities and things like that. But what I want to impress to you is, you may think, when I ask you the question that we talked about at the beginning, am I good enough to start a business? And you may think, nope, not good enough yet. Let's say specifically talking about starting a business where you're charging regularly, working with clients and charging for your services as an audio guy or as a producer, as a musician even. And somebody on the chat, I just said I was a normal guy and they said define normal. It's funny, Tom. I'm a normal in the sense of, never mind. You get it. Where was I? Tom, you got me. I was maintaining focus, and then Tom and then Johnny laughed at it. Where was I? So you may initially think that you can't charge, that you're not good enough to charge for your services. But the point is, when I started my business, it was centered around, who can I serve? What group can I serve? And I can serve a group of people who are just getting into recording, right? A group of people who maybe just bought their first audio interface and they're getting sounds, and now they realize, oh man, this is hard. I don't know what to do. And they're going to be going to their computer searching for ways to figure out how to do this and how to get better at it, because it's become this passion that surprised them. They didn't set out to become an audio guy, but now they're looking for help. I can help that person because I've been that person, and I'm a little further down the road than they are. You, wherever you are, unless you just started yesterday, chances are you've been doing this for a while, and you are further down the road than somebody else. Whether it's you own audio equipment and they don't, and they need to record and they don't have equipment and you do. Guess what? You are in a position to provide real value to them. Now, is it $1 million worth of value? Maybe not, but is it maybe $100 worth of value? Yeah, or somewhere in between. The point is, you have a set of skills now that people don't. That there are people who wish they had your set of skills or wish they knew someone who had that skill set that they could use and even pay to help them get somewhere. And that's the point I want to make. You don't have to be Chris Lord-Alge to be able to charge for mixing. You don't have to be Dave Pensado to tell someone, yeah, I'll mix that for X number of dollars. You don't have to. No one's expecting you to be. They don't even, the thing is, the person you're talking to isn't going out and getting quotes from Chris Lord-Alge and then comparing them to yours. They don't know Chris Lord-Alge exists. You're the first person probably they know that does this stuff. And as long as your stuff doesn't sound like garbage, which hopefully if you've been following Home Studio Corner, your stuff doesn't sound like garbage anymore. If your stuff doesn't sound like garbage, then they're going to say, yeah, sure, let's do it. And this isn't the kind of person you're going to put up a Craigslist ad and find. More than likely, it's someone you know or someone you meet through normal channels. It's not going to be like a Facebook ad and then you get all this business for your studio. It's going to be through normal relationship type stuff for the most part. But if you can offer them something and you can offer them good results, it doesn't matter that there's someone else who could maybe do more or maybe do better. What matters is that you can offer them what they want and they're going to be happy with it. I'm not saying we're going to trick people. I'm not saying to be anything like dishonest, but the fact is you can record something and they can't, and they're going to see so much value in that. So if you can run with that thought process and you can think, okay, yeah, you know what? I am good at some of this stuff. I can do a good job of recording vocals for somebody, or I can write an arrangement for them for this song that they wrote. Suddenly you're starting to unlock doors to things that maybe you never allowed yourself to think about before. And if you do that, then you just might be taking the first little baby steps towards potentially having and running a business that provides real income for you and your family. Will it be your full-time thing? I don't know. Does talent matter? Yes, of course it does. Some people are going to be more talented than others. But guess what? There's more than one of everything in the world. Chris Lord-Alge, really talented. But there are other people making a full-time living as mix engineers. Why? Because everybody has different tastes, and everybody has different budgets, and everybody has different connections. There's more than one place to buy deodorant in the world. Why? Because there are multiple stores that do it, and enough people shop at all of them. There's lots of people. There's lots of opportunity. If you have a little bit of talent and you've put in a little bit of work, there's potential that you could start a little bit of a business. And I would strongly encourage you to try it. Just kick fear in the face and say, you know what? I'm going to give this thing a shot. What could happen? Boom. I said that was going to be a little rant. I could have talked for another hour. If you like hearing about that kind of stuff and want to talk more, let me know in the comments. I kind of steer the Home Studio Corner ship a lot of times based on what seems to resonate with people. So if that resonated with you and you want to talk more about that, let me know. Leave a comment below this video or come back to the website and find it, whatever. By the way, if I haven't mentioned this yet on this episode, if you're not following me on Facebook, go to Facebook, search for my name, Joe Gilder Music. Music's not my name, but I have it on the end of it. Go and make sure you like the page there because there's a lot of fun stuff. That and YouTube are kind of my hubs for the time being. And there's a lot of fun, spontaneous stuff that happens there. For example, I needed to record a guitar solo for a client. I had a big tracking session with Tim Horsley and Steve Peffer last week, and turns out the song called for a couple of guitar solos, and I can sort of pull that off if you give me enough time, but I'm not the kind that just says, okay, done. It takes me a while. So I scheduled some time this morning to lay down a solo or two solos on one song. It's a song with two different solo sections. And on Facebook, I just used the Facebook Live app to stream, and for 45 minutes, worked out a guitar solo. And a lot of it's just me messing up on guitar, which maybe that's endearing. I don't know. I'm not super great at guitar, but I can get it done. And there was this cool interaction where people were actually saying, hey, why don't you try this? Or I really like the first half of that solo. What if you did this and that? And it was really fun. So you miss out on that kind of stuff if you're not following me on Facebook. So if you're anti-Facebook, I don't know what to tell you. It's here. I don't think it's going anywhere. Come hang out. That's enough of my commercial. Let's jump into your questions. Those of you in the live chat, I'm going to lean pretty heavily on you for the questions for today's episode. Based on what I was talking about, or whatever you have to ask about is fair game. Don't limit it to business. But if what I said triggered some questions for you, I want to hear about them so that I can answer them. And I've got a couple questions over in Facebook as well. All right. Daniel, who I think is here on the live stream as well. He's a double dipper. I love it. He says, how do you go about finding the right clients for your style of work? Or do you? The idea of recording other people has always been exciting to me until it clicked that if they don't do a similar style of music to my own, I may be lost when it comes to recording them. I could get by just fine doing other singer-songwriters, but I'd be useless if a band came to me, as I have little or no experience with instruments they'd use. So if a singer-songwriter came, great. If a band came, not so great. I think it's a really great question. The thing about this style of work is it's a catch-22 chicken or the egg kind of thing, right? If you've never recorded a band, then bands may not want to have you record them because you've never recorded a band. But then if that's the case, then you'll never record a band. So at some point, you've got to get into that space a little bit, right? You've got to figure out some way to develop some experience recording a band. That could be make friends with someone who is recording bands and offer to work for them for free, or offer to be a fly on the wall, or just ask if you can come sit in on a session and just absorb it. I mean, that's a lot of when I went to school and we talked about audio, a lot of it was just sitting back and watching someone else work. Thanks to the internet, you can get a lot of that experience from watching videos and live streams and things like that. Is it the same? No, not at all. But you'd be shocked the kind of things you can pick up. For example, if you're a VIP member, Daniel, I can't remember if you are, I've got a backlog of 5+ years worth of videos of me working on music. And sometimes it's, recording drums in this back room. Sometimes it's recording, figuring out how to write and record background vocal ooh and ah parts. Sometimes it's mixing a song. Sometimes it's recording an entire song using an SM7 and toy blocks that my kid had laying in the floor. Like, there's all sorts of different things and challenges. I did record a song on an iPhone using the built-in iPhone and like the GarageBand app. Turned out kind of cool. So if you haven't checked out some of those videos, that might be worth checking out, Daniel. And you are a Viper, so yeah, you probably have checked out some of those. Might be worth diving through the archives and finding a few that kind of deal with some of the stuff you're uncomfortable with, and maybe that'll help you kind of move in the right direction. That said, working with bands is a different thing, and I don't really have a video. I need to do one, figure out a way to make it work where bringing in a band and kind of showing that process, because it is something that is really scary and overwhelming. And even when I do full band sessions, it's just nerve-wracking because there's a lot of pressure to get a lot of things right. And it can be really, really intoxicatingly fun, but it can also be pretty stressful too. So what I would say is find ways to get involved in that world without the pressure being on you. And then slowly you'll have to get to the point where you feel somewhat confident. Then you'll have to take the plunge. And that could mean doing something for free. But remember, I've said this before, just offering to record a band for free isn't valuable unless you can actually provide something good. If just because it's free, they still have to invest their time and effort to come record with you. And if you don't give them a good product in the end, then you've actually cost them something. So you have to be good. You have to be able to do good work. But on the flip side, what I would say is really double down on the stuff you are comfortable with. So if you're a singer-songwriter, a guy or girl in an acoustic guitar, and that's your wheelhouse, and then I feel like those would be more, maybe not easier to find, but especially if you're in a place where there's a fair number of songwriter nights, a lot of songwriters just want to have their stuff recorded. And if they're trying to play the Nashville game where they want to pitch their songs to different artists and things like that, then they'll need to have it recorded well and sounding good and all that. I think you could probably enter into relationships with different songwriters and work on stuff. If it's just a guitar vocal, and then maybe the next time you add 2 guitars and try to mess with some production, add some keyboards the next time, bring in some percussion, so some tambourines and some shakers, and maybe the next time you get a cajon, that box thing, and you add that in, and you learn on the job, you learn how to record a cajon while working on a project. Those are the kind of things I would do, kind of work your way up in kind of production and a number of instruments level until you're at a point where you feel like, you know what, I could probably pull off a live band thing. Let's do it. So those are some ideas, Daniel. I think there's a time to step out of your comfort zone, and there's a time to say, you know what, let me just really spend some time doing the thing I do well, and a lot. And with that confidence, you might have more confidence to jump into something that's not quite your thing. That said, if someone hired me to do a pop record or a hip hop record, I'd probably just say, let me introduce you to someone else who, like, I don't even have all the sample libraries. If you're a rock band, a country band, a folk band that wants to record instruments, great. But if you're wanting me to like do a heavily produced with lots of like bass drops and stuff like that, I'm not set up to do that. I don't at this moment in time have any interest in that style of music. So it's just not a right fit. So that's legit too. I know plenty of songwriter friends in Nashville who, Andy Gullahorn is an example. We're mixing his song in Dueling Mixes this month. All of his records are pretty much him and a bunch of acoustic guitars and some light percussion and things like cello and piano. I don't know if I've heard many that have a full band, and that's just his thing. And part of it's just he wants to keep it low budget because he's an independent songwriter. He doesn't have huge budgets coming down from record labels to do this stuff, and then he just makes it happen. So you don't have to go full band if you don't want to, and maybe there's a niche that you can find. The more stuff you're able to do, obviously, the more people you can appeal to. But just like I said in the beginning of this podcast, I made a conscious effort with Home Studio Corner to focus on the home studio crowd, which means I'm not going after live sound guys. I'm not going after full-time studio guys who are working in big professional studios. Now, do I get some of them as customers and subscribers? Sure, because I'm talking about stuff they're interested in. But really, my target audience is people like you who are doing home recording and are really passionate about it and are trying to get better. And that's kind of where I feel like I can help the most. Another question from Chad Martin. Chad's a Dueling Mixes member who came to the Dueling Mixes meetup we had in Nashville back in the summer. Chad says, he didn't even have a question. He just said, great topic, and he'll tune in later. Well, dang, Chad. I already built you up and everything, and then you didn't have a question. Here's one from Brian Perry in the live chat. He says, thanks, but how do I approach the recording question? Because many don't record themselves. Oops, I'm missing the first part of the question. He says, okay, basically he's asking, he meets bands and wants to know, here we go, I'm looking to start an online mixing business, but to be honest, I do not want to record anyone. I just want to mix and help produce their music. What's the best way for me to find potential clients? The first answer would be, well, you're pigeonholing yourself. And there's some legitimacy there. I feel like we talked about this in Dueling Mixes coaching call last week. There's an element of most bands are looking for someone to help them make their music. And for me, people I've worked with, if I record it, I tend to mix it. Almost never do they have me record it and someone else mix it. So that's a battle you have to fight. Doesn't mean it's wrong, but I would say you need to explore why you have no interest in recording, because then you'd have control over the whole deal. But Dean has a point in the chat that's great. He says maybe you can partner with someone. There are people who only want to record and have no interest in mixing. I think that kind of partnership makes a lot of sense. It's really smart, Dean. I'm sure you know someone who is into recording, and y'all can go in together. And maybe you charge the band as a whole. Maybe you start a little side business together, a little partnership. He's doing the recording, you're doing the mixing, and it's one rate for the band that you guys split, however you figure makes sense. As far as a few practical answers to your original question, there's a website called soundbetter.com. It's a kind of a place to go, like an Elance for audio jobs. I've done a few mastering gigs there, but really just because someone knew me and referred me to their client and they had done the mixing. But I believe the guy who referred me, the person went to SoundBetter and posted a job, and then they picked someone who bid on the job, and they got the job and mixed it. So it's certainly doable. Crowdaudio.com is a place as well. It's kind of like a crowdsourcing mixing thing. It's a little more, I haven't been there in a while, but it seems like it's geared a little more towards getting to mix stuff and then maybe potentially getting paid if the person picks you, which is great if you're wanting experience, but not great if you're needing that income or wanting to do this more from a business standpoint. But I'm not too sure how that's set up lately. Those are a couple ideas that I have. The biggest thing, again, it doesn't matter what kind of client you're trying to find. If this is what you're wanting to do, you got to rub shoulders with all the people that need your service. And that could be becoming friends with all the musicians in your area and the bands in your area, and also becoming friends with the engineers in your area. Maybe there's some, like we said before, maybe you don't start a partnership together. Apparently Crowd Audio closed. I didn't know that. Thank you, Tiki. So forget the last thing I said about Crowd Audio. So maybe you find an engineer, and maybe he doesn't want to do a full-on partnership, but maybe he really would love to just hand off clients to you. If you can show that you have talent in that area, then maybe he hands things off and you get the job done. There are different communities you can be a part of online. My VIP community is one that I'm obviously very biased about. But a lot of them do a lot of collaborations together. I don't know how much of them are hiring one another, to be honest, but it's a great place for collaboration because some guys tend to like the recording and not the mixing and vice versa. I will say I've gotten a lot of work inadvertently through Home Studio Corner from people who have gotten to the point where they can record stuff and it sounds pretty good, but they're not confident enough in their mixing ability to be able to mix. And they'd rather have someone else do it, and they've seen me do it, they know I can do it, so they hire me to do it. That's another alternative is finding a way to have a presence online where you demonstrate what you can do and people come to you and ask for stuff. To me, it's a longer play. Like I said, it took me years to get Home Studio Corner to a place where people were asking me to work on their stuff, but that's something I would do. But bigger thing I would do is just those relationships, finding people who need what you do, however that works out, and making it happen. Tom says, just curious, what's your primary source? And again, I don't know how many people are asking me and asking Brian. There's a big conversation going on over in the chat, which I love. Let me see if I got any other questions here. Excuse me. All right. I think that's it. A little light on the questions, but I think this is a good episode. I feel like we covered a lot of good stuff, and I feel like we're going to, I don't know. I feel like we might be moving in a cool direction. Really love the interaction. Thank you, everybody who made it out here live. And, Tom was asking me. Let me answer this final question for Tom. Tom said, what's your primary source for mixed projects? People who find your website, referrals, or other? For the most part, it's especially lately, it's been people on the website. So customers of mine, people like you, people who a lot of times they're VIP members who have seen me work and they're kind of really in my camp and they trust me, and they get to a point of being done with a project and they say, well, I'm not ready to mix this. Would you mix it for me? And then, of course, any project that I produce, I'm usually mixing. I can't think of a time I haven't. And the occasional referral of just a mixing job, but that from a friend or something like that. But usually, like I said before, and this is kind of what I was talking about with Brian's question earlier, usually not really getting a lot of, I've not, in my experience, I've rarely had a gig where someone else recorded it and I mixed it. That's a very kind of high level thing, but down here in the home studio world, we tend to record, produce, and mix it all for the same person. So that's about all the time I have for. I totally did not time that well with the outro music as it was coming, so I'm going to move that back. Thank you so much for being a part of this. Thanks for watching. Thanks for being a part of Home Studio Corner, and I will see you next week.